One day, Ola decided to confront her husband. She could not endure her husband's attitude any longer. She became angry at Ade and began to scold him. But Ade didn't care about his wife's pain, and he began to beat Ola even in her pregnancy. He beat Ola until she fainted. Once upon a time, in Udeme village, there lived a woman named Ola, who was 37 years old. At 37, she had everything: a thriving business and financial security, the respect of the village as well. Yet, there was one thing she longed for which was missing in her life, and that was a husband. Ola was the first daughter in her family, and she had 3 younger sisters. 2 were happily married and living peacefully with their husbands. She was left in her father's house with her youngest sister, who was the last daughter of the family. All her friends were married and had children, and this made Ola feel really sad and depressed each time she came across any of her childhood friends. Although it was not like suitors were not coming for Ola. Suitors were coming in their numbers, but they were not the kind of men Ola wanted for herself, because they were not rich. They were all broke men. Ola felt they were not on the same level with her. Perhaps they were coming for her money, so for that reason she rejected them. She was longing for a man who was on the same financial level as her, but such men were not coming for her hand in marriage. Although Ola was not bothered, because she believed that God's time was the best for her. But things began to take ugly turns for Ola when a suitor came for her youngest sister's hand in marriage. On the day her sister's marital right was to be paid, all her aunties and uncles who came in from different towns were in attendance for her sister's marriage. Their house was filled with visitors. Ola, who was so busy with the preparations, bumped into one of her aunts named Bisola. Her aunt began to ask her questions.
Ola, is this you? Wow, you're still not yet married. What is keeping you waiting, eh? What are you still waiting for? Time is no longer on your side. All your younger sisters are married. You are a beautiful woman. You should have men coming for you, eh? So what is the problem, Ola?
Ola was lost in words, and he didn't even know how to give reply to her auntie. She said to her, "Auntie, God's time is the best. I am waiting on God, and besides, I have not seen the one I love."
You don't have to say that. Heaven helps those that help themselves. You have to do better, Ola.
Ola left her aunt's presence in shame. As she was about to move inside her house, she saw some group of women pointing at her. She overheard them making some side talks.
Is this not the eldest of them? Why is she not yet married? Her younger sisters are all married, and yet she's comfortably making preparations for her younger sister. What is she still waiting for?
She will soon enter menopause. Look at her. She thinks she's still a young girl. Maybe she has a bad character. That is why she's still not married, and no man finds her attractive. Ola, on hearing those side talks from these women, became very sad. She ran into her room, locked herself up, and began to cry while she questioned God.
Oh God, why don't you just give me a husband of my choice? Why don't you just give me my own husband? Must I be mocked for my prayers to be answered?
While there were celebrations going on at the compound, Ola was inside her room crying her eyes out. She refused to go out all through the event. Her second younger sister, named Idafe, noticed her absence. She came into the room and saw her sister sobbing and crying. She sat down with her and began to give her sister words of encouragement. But Ola, whose heart was so broken, asked her sister to leave because she needed to be left alone. Ola continued to weep until she slept off on her bed in her own tears. Few days after the celebration, Ola was now left home alone with her father and her mother. The absence of a husband in her life made her feel lonely, empty and unfulfilled, even though she had a successful booming business. She was depressed. Things got even worse for Ola when her mother began to pressure her to get married. Her mother would nag her and question her at every mistake she makes, and would always blame her mistakes on her inability to marry. Ola could not keep up with her mother's constant nagging. To avoid it, she stopped coming home every night and opted to sleep at her store. She only returned home during the weekend. One fateful afternoon, while Ola was in her store thinking about her life, a friend of hers named Ayo came to visit her. Ayo saw Ola looking so sad and moody, deeply lost in her thoughts. She quickly called Ola and Ola sprung in surprise.
Ola, what are you thinking about? Why do you look so moody and sad? Would it be because you are yet to find a husband? Well, for me, I would advise you to try to find a way and get pregnant. Try to have at least one child. You're not getting any younger before menopause hits.
Ola, on hearing this advice from her friend, became even more sad. So she decided and made up her mind that she was going to accept any man that comes again for her hand in marriage. It didn't matter if he was poor or rich or had something doing. All she wanted was just a man.
But unfortunately for Ola,
men were no longer coming. So she began to pray to God to give her just any man. After 2 months, one day while at her store, she met a young man named Ade. Ade was a tall, handsome man, and he was in his early 40s. He had come to make some purchase from Ola's store, and he saw her and liked her. Ade started to make advances at Ola, and she readily accepted his advances. During their courtship, Ola noticed some strange and troubling behaviors in Ade. However, she dismissed them, clinging only to the belief that he would change after marriage. Ola, blinded by her own financial security, never bothered to find out the kind of job Ade did for a living. All she knew was that he was working, and she assumed everything would be fine as long as she had money. The desperation for marriage clouded Ola's judgment. She ignored all the red flags about Ade. Anything that could make her dislike Ade or force her to reconsider him was conveniently ignored. All she craved for was to be married. A few months later, Ola and Ade tied the knots. Congratulations rained down on them, especially from Ola's mother, who was relieved that her daughter had finally found a husband. The day unfolded in a joyous celebration, but as the last guest departed, a strange emptiness settled over Ola. Ola was now left to face her marriage. The truth about her decision, the truth she had desperately ignored, began to unfold before her very eyes. Few months into the marriage, Ola discovered a harsh truth. Ade was unemployed and had lied about having a job. This revelation didn't faze Ola, because she was very rich and didn't see that as a problem since she had money. A wealthy woman in her own right, believing money could solve any problem. She impulsively withdrew a huge sum of money from her business and handed it over to Ade to start a business venture. Ade was very happy and thanked his wife graciously. But Ade never used that money for business. He had no intentions of starting a business. He squandered the money on drinks and luxurious items. The truth shattered Ola. When she discovered Ade had squandered the entire sum, a crushing weight of sadness and regret settled over her. She desperately wished she had never entrusted him with such a huge amount of money. Few months later, Ola became pregnant with her first child. She was so happy that finally she was going to be a mother. As her pregnancy progressed, managing both her business and the home became increasingly difficult for her. She needed a helping hand in her business. She asked her husband, who was jobless, doing nothing at the moment, to help her. But Ade bluntly refused and told her that he was not familiar with how her business works. Even though pregnant, Ola worked hard every day at her business. She also cooked, cleaned, and even washed her husband's clothes after work. Ade, on the other hand, didn't help at all. He just slept and ate all day long. Each time Ola tried to ask him to find something doing or help with some house chores at home in order to relieve her of some burdens, her husband would get angry and leave home for days without coming back. While heavily pregnant and worried sick, Ola would sit outside at night waiting for him to come home, but he would never come home for days. One day, Ola decided to confront her husband. She could not endure her husband's attitude any longer. She became angry at Ade and began to scold him. But Ade didn't care about his wife's pain, and he began to beat Ola even in her pregnancy. He beat Ola until she fainted. He said to her,
"This is just the beginning, you stupid woman. Try me again and see what I will do to you. Next time, I will make sure you join your ancestors."
Ade went out, leaving his wife, who was bleeding and not minding the fact that her life could be in danger. Ola was taken to the hospital by her neighbor. Fortunately for her, she didn't lose her baby. She came back home after she fully recovered. Ade didn't come back home for days. Neither did he ask about Ola or his unborn child. But a few weeks later, he came back home. Ola, on seeing her husband's attitude, decided not to bother him about finding a job or working. She continued to struggle until 9 months after her pregnancy was due. She gave birth to her first child, a baby boy. Being a new mother was not easy on Ola, but she continued to endure and manage her home responsibly. 2 years later, Ola took in again and gave birth to her second baby, this time a baby girl. After the birth of her second child, life became so hard for Ola. Her workload increased, but there was no one to assist her. She needed the assistance of her husband, but her husband Ade was so lazy to assist her at home or at her business. All he did was sleep and eat. One day, Ola could not endure any of it any longer. She became so angry, and out of frustration, she began to scold Ade, telling him to be useful and perform his fatherly duties. But Ade, who could not see reason with his wife, rather, he felt Ola was insulting him, and out of anger, he began to beat Ola. After beating her, he immediately left home. He went to his in-laws' house and reported Ola to her father and mother. He told them that Ola was very disrespectful to him and that she always insulted him simply because she had more money than him. Her mother was not happy to hear that her daughter was disrespecting her husband, and so she decided to visit her daughter and caution her and also ask her the reasons behind her actions. Saying that his mother-in-law was coming to stay, Ade was worried she might discover about his bad habits. He came up with an idea after so many hours of thinking. Early the next morning, while everyone was still asleep, Ade took some of his belongings and left home. He left very early when no one could see him. When the day broke, Ola woke up and could not find her husband. She searched all the corners of her house and the village, but her husband was nowhere to be found. Ola was confused and couldn't understand his sudden disappearance. Just when she was thinking about her husband's disappearance, a sudden realization struck her. She hurried into her room to check on the money she hid for restocking her business, only to find out the money was missing and nowhere to be found. Ola screamed. She fell on her knees and began to cry.
Is this the end of my business? Is this the end for me? Who will I run to? I have gone from eating on the table to eating on the ground. Ha!
Ola kept crying while her mother tried to console her. It then occurred to Ola that she had married an irresponsible person as a husband. Her business was at the verge of falling because she had no money to restock her goods. All her money was gone. In order to return her business, she borrowed a huge sum of money from the women community organization which she was part of. They lent her a sustainable amount of money for her to pay back in 3 months' time. Her business was booming and came back to normal in no long time. 3 months later, Ade came back all of a sudden, fell on his knees and began to plead with Ola to accept him back. Ola, out of anger, poured water on him and chased him out with a big stick. Ade ran out in fear. Few days later, he came back to plead for forgiveness. This time around, he came with his family members. They all knelt down begging Ola to forgive Ade, and they promised Ola they would pay for the damages their son had caused, but she should give them some time to come up with the money. Ola forgave Ade and accepted him back for the sake of their children, because she didn't want them to grow up without their father. Ade became of good conduct and began to take care of the home and help his wife in her business. Ola was very happy and felt that her husband had turned a new leaf. She began to praise God and thank him. Ade worked so hard to gain her trust back, and it worked. But after 6 months, it was time for Ola to return the money she had borrowed back from the women community. Early that morning, Ola returned home carrying a surprisingly large sum of money. She went straight to the bathroom for a shower. After drying up and getting dressed, she rushed to the spot where she had hidden the money, but it was gone. Panic surged through her as she frantically searched every single corner of the room, yet there was no trace of the money. She went to the living room to ask her husband if he had seen any money, but her husband was not in the living room. She searched all around the house, but there was no trace of him. She ran outside her house, screaming her husband's name, but no one answered. And it occurred to her that again her husband had gone missing with her money. Ola, unable to bear the shock, fainted and collapsed outside. Her neighbors found her lying there, and after sprinkling some water on her face, she regained consciousness. Overwhelmed with despair, Ola cried uncontrollably. The impending meeting she had with the women's organization from whom she had borrowed money terrified her. What could she possibly say? Would they even listen? Sleep evaded her. her mind was consumed deeply by worry. She considered running away from the village with her children, but on a second thought, she realized that running away would make her a thief and bring shame to her family. Her parents would be implicated, and the organization might even hold her mother responsible for paying the debt. So she decided she was going to stay and face the consequences. When Ola arrived at the venue of the meeting, she became so scared. She tearfully explained what happened and how she had lost the money. The news triggered anger among many members. They couldn't accept losing such a large sum. They reminded Ola that the money represented contributions made throughout the year, intended for a year-end disbursement. Some women, particularly upset, even decided and threatened to take action against Ola. Ola left the meeting venue in shame, fear, and disappointment because she didn't know what actions might be taken up against her by the women organization. When she got home, she held her children and began to cry. It felt like the worst moment of her life. She began to flash back through her life and she cursed the day she met Ade. 2 days later, members of the women's organization arrived at Ola's house with the police. They arrested her and took her away, leaving her young toddlers alone. A kind neighbor took the children in, while someone else was sent to inform Ola's mother about what had happened and asked her to come and pick her 2 grandchildren. When her mother arrived, she wept bitterly and took her 2 grandchildren home with her. Ola was jailed for 2 weeks and 2 days, after which she was taken to court and was found guilty. Ola was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. She had to serve 7 years jail term just to recompensate for the money that was lost. She had already served 2 years in jail, but luck smiled on her again. A rich, powerful man of God came for evangelism at the prisons, and after preaching to the inmates, he saw Ola seated at the corner and crying. He was attracted to Ola, and he asked her why she was crying. Ola narrated all that had happened to her. He felt so sorry for Ola, and he decided he was going to help her clear the debt. The next day, the pastor cleared all the debt Ola was owing. An agreement was signed at the police station, and Ola was released from the prison. Ola went on her knees and thanked the man of God for saving her. The man of God also gave her a very huge amount of money to add to her business. Ola was about to be twice as rich as she was before. She thanked God deeply for remembering her after years of suffering. She opened her business and it began to boom even more than before, and she became a very rich woman in the village. Ola swore never to marry again or have anything to do with any man. She lived with her 2 children in peace and happiness. After some months, Ola located her ex-husband and arrested him for stealing and fraud, and he was sentenced to 14 years imprisonment. The moral lesson of this story makes us understand that we must not allow societal pressure to rush us into marriage. Marriage needs preparation. Ola felt pressure to get married because all her younger sisters were married, and because of societal expectations. This clouded her judgment and led her to marry someone who wasn't right for her. And at the time when she was suffering, the society was not there to suffer with her. The story teaches us that rushing into decisions due to pressure or desperation can lead to unhappy consequences. It's important to take your time, choose wisely, and prioritize quality relationship to create a strong and supportive partnership. It is important for parents to protect their children and not pressure them into making harsh decisions out of desperation. Dear uncles and aunties, please stop asking, when will you get married? There are other things to ask about. Do not pressure the young ones into getting married. You do not know if the person is trying to heal from a very painful heartbreak or going through some emotional distress. Overall, let us be kind to people and not gossip about their predicaments, whether they are yet unmarried or they are yet to bear children. Let us not be the reason why someone goes into depression or why someone has to make a desperate decision. Thank you for watching this story. I hope you enjoy it. Do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell button so you get notified every time we post new videos. Thank you.